The story of Noah's Ark isn't just a children's tale about animals and rain. It's a prophetic warning, a divine strategy, a call to prepare not out of fear, but out of obedience. What if the next global crisis won't be about water, but clarity, conviction, and whether you've built anything that can withstand the storm? In this story, we look deeper, not just at how Noah survived, but what he carried through the flood and what it teaches us about the days ahead. Because the waters are rising again, and only what's built by faith will float. When the waters weren't rising yet. The story of Noah doesn't begin with a flood. It begins with warning. And long before the ark floated, it looked foolish. That tension between foresight and faith is where this story still confronts us today. It didn't start with water. It started with a whisper, a divine nudge into the unknown. Before any clouds gathered, before a drop of rain hit the dirt, Noah was told to prepare, to build, to believe in something that hadn't yet happened. The world was violent, corrupt, disconnected from the sacred, and yet, stable on the surface. People were building lives, celebrating marriages, planting crops, unaware they were drifting toward disaster. It's not so different now. The world doesn't always look like it's drowning, until it is. Noah's story isn't just about catastrophe. It's about clarity before crisis. It asks us, what do you do when you hear something others don't? When you sense coming change that isn't visible yet? He was told to build a vessel the size of a stadium. No water in sight, no precedent, no applause, and he built. Sometimes obedience looks insane until hindsight proves it prophetic. That's what makes Noah more than a figure from children's books. Strip away the animal pairs and rainbow coloring pages, and you're left with a man living in resistance to the norm, not for rebellion's sake, but because he trusted a voice beyond what his eyes could see. That's where this gets personal. Many of us feel it now. That edge. That quiet unease beneath headlines and economies and shifting cultural ground. The sense that something larger is looming, that the systems we trust may not hold. But what are we doing with that feeling? Are we building something? Or are we waiting for the storm to prove us right? Noah didn't wait. He moved when the skies were still blue. There's a second layer here, one we often forget. God gave Noah instructions, precise ones. The ark wasn't improvised. It was revealed, down to the dimensions. That tells us something powerful. In a coming crisis, preparation is not just possible. It's divinely guided. That's good news because the next global upheaval, whatever form it takes, won't be solved by panic or survivalism alone. It will require obedience, discernment, preparation rooted in trust, not fear. And here's the twist. The ark wasn't just a rescue boat. It was a reset chamber. The world that entered the flood wasn't the same world that came out. Crisis was the passage, but the purpose was transformation. That's where we're going in this story, not into fear, but through it. Into the architecture of what it means to be ready, not just physically, but spiritually and relationally, for what's coming. What is your ark? What are you being asked to build while others still sleep? Not because you want to escape the world, but because you may be called to preserve something within it. This isn't just about Noah. It's about us and what we do before the rain comes. A blueprint for the end and the beginning. Noah's story is more than survival. It's a spiritual architecture. A prophetic design for what to do when everything familiar begins to shake. Let's explore the deeper meanings beneath the wood and water. We often reduce the flood to a natural disaster. But in the language of Scripture, it was never just water. It was a reset, a confrontation between corruption and covenant, a turning point not just in history, but in how heaven and earth interacted. And at the center of it was not just a boat, but a man with ears to hear before anyone else could see. Let's slow down and ask, what was the ark really? A lifeboat? Yes. A mobile zoo? Sure. But symbolically, it was something more profound, a divine strategy, a plan downloaded from heaven to preserve life in the middle of judgment. In Genesis 6, God gives Noah very specific instructions: cubits, levels, materials, a door, a window. It's not poetic, it's architectural, and that detail tells us something critical. God doesn't just warn us about crisis, He gives us blueprints for how to live through it. We are not left to guess how to respond to chaos. The instructions might not look like gopher wood and pitch today, but the principle still holds. There are rhythms and postures we're invited into, not just when things fall apart, but before they do. This is the first theme. Revelation precedes rescue. Noah didn't invent the ark, he received it. And receiving requires listening. Most people missed the coming storm because they stopped listening. The noise of culture drowned out the frequency of truth. Are we still listening? Do we even believe God speaks before the crisis breaks loose? The second theme is one we don't like to sit with. Judgment is real, but it's not the final word. The flood wasn't random wrath. It was grief. Genesis says God's heart was filled with pain when He saw the earth's condition. The flood wasn't rage. It was sorrow. That matters, because it reframes how we understand divine justice not as detached fury, but as the heartbreak of a creator watching his creation spiral. That leads to the third theme. Salvation is always specific. Only one ark. Only one door. That's not exclusion. It's clarity. We live in a culture obsessed with infinite paths, where every belief system is a buffet, and every worldview is equally valid. But Noah's story doesn't support that. There was one way out of the judgment, and it had to be entered in faith before the storm came. Noah had to step inside the ark and close the door without seeing the clouds. The invitation came before the evidence. This mirrors how God still operates. He doesn't promise comfort. He doesn't guarantee consensus. But He does offer covenant, a path forward for those willing to trust what they can't yet see. And here's something people often overlook. Noah didn't shut the door. God did. Genesis 7:16 says, "Then the Lord shut him in." It was divine timing. Divine sealing. God Himself marked the moment between mercy extended and judgment released. That raises a haunting question. When will that door close again? And will we have entered by then? There's one final thread running through this whole story. Preservation is not selfish. It's sacred. We often feel guilty about preparing, as if making plans is an act of fear. But the ark wasn't an escape pod for Noah alone. It was a womb for the next world. A place where legacy, family, and life itself could be held through the storm. What you prepare now may not be for you alone. It may be for generations to come. Your spiritual disciplines, your family boundaries, your financial stewardship, your commitment to truth. These are not fear-based acts. They are faith-based arcs. They are how we build while others scroll. How we stay steady while others panic. Not because we're better, but because we're listening. The ark, the door, and the water that divides worlds. Sometimes, what looks like a story of destruction is really a map for rebirth. Every element in the story of Noah is layered with meaning. From the wood beneath his feet to the silence after the storm, the ark wasn't just a lifeboat. It was a line drawn in history. One side marked by chaos, the other by covenant. The door wasn't just a plank of wood. It was the line between life and death. The water wasn't just a flood. It was a baptism. Every part of Noah's story breathes with layers deeper than we often see. Let's start with the ark itself. In Hebrew tradition, the word used for ark, tevah, is only used one other time in the Old Testament, to describe the basket Moses was placed in as a baby. Think about that. 2 vessels, Two moments of chaos, two instruments of divine rescue. One carries a remnant of humanity, the other carries a deliverer for the people. Both float not by strength, but by design. Both are sealed. Both are released into the water and held there, until the time is right for re-emergence. This isn't coincidence, it's divine poetry. The ark is a metaphor for sacred preservation, not as avoidance of danger, but as passage through it. It's a womb, not a fortress, a place not to escape the world, but to be remade within it. Then there's the door. Genesis tells us Noah, his family, and the animals enter the ark, and then God closes the door. That moment is symbolic. The door is not just functional, it represents timing, invitation, a window of mercy. And when it closes, it seals a transition. Everything inside enters a season of waiting. Everything outside faces the result of delay. Jesus later speaks of a door in similar terms. The narrow gate, the shut door of the parable of the 10 virgins. In every case, the imagery carries the same tension. Opportunity must be responded to in time. The door won't stay open forever. But the most striking symbol in Noah's story is the one we fear the most: the water. It's easy to reduce the flood to judgment. But water in Scripture is almost always double-edged. It both destroys and delivers. Think of the Red Sea. The Israelites pass through safely, but Egypt is swallowed. Think of Jonah, cast into the depths before deliverance. Think of baptism, dying to the old, rising in the new. Water becomes the tool of transformation. And in Noah's story, it washes away corruption while lifting the ark. What destroys the world becomes the very thing that lifts Noah higher. That's no accident. It's the paradox of judgment and mercy. The same waves that drown are the waves that carry. The difference? Obedience, timing, preparation. This is why Peter in the New Testament directly connects Noah's Ark to baptism, 1 Peter 3:20-21. He's not just referencing history, he's pointing to the deeper pattern, that every act of salvation includes some form of burial, and every burial, when surrendered to God, includes resurrection on the other side. This makes Noah's Ark more than a rescue mission. It's a foreshadowing of Christ, the wooden vessel that saves a remnant, the door sealed by divine timing, the emergence of a new world after the judgment passes. That's not just Noah, that's the gospel. And maybe that's why this story still matters so much, because even now, there are floods rising, not necessarily of water, but of culture, anxiety, disinformation, compromise. And we're all building something in response. The only question is, what kind of vessel is it? The Ark teaches us not just to survive, but to carry something sacred into the future, to preserve what matters, to become living symbols of another way. Because one day, the waters will rise again. And when they do, the thing that looked foolish before the storm may be the only thing that floats when it's over. What it means to build an ark now. We're not asked to build with gopher wood and pitch anymore, but we are still called to prepare. The instructions may look different, but the urgency is the same. This is where faith becomes strategy. If you were Noah today, what would your ark look like? It's easy to spiritualize the story until it floats too high to touch. But the beauty of Scripture is that it breathes into the present, not as a relic, but as a mirror. And if the flood is more than water, then the ark is more than wood. It's a lifestyle, a discipline, a way of constructing your life in advance of the storm. In a world where everything feels reactive, political whiplash, economic uncertainty, culture wars, even climate anxieties, the call to preparation before crisis becomes both prophetic and countercultural. So what does it mean to build an ark in the world we live in now? First, it means listening deeply. Noah wasn't just lucky, he was tuned in. That level of discernment doesn't happen overnight. It's cultivated. And that means withdrawing from the noise, carving out silence, building an inner radar for truth in a world that monetizes distraction. Are you cultivating stillness? Can God speak to you without shouting? Second, it means living on assignment, not by default. The ark wasn't a hobby, it was a mandate. Noah didn't build it on weekends. And it wasn't just for him. It was for his family, his legacy, and the animals that would repopulate the earth. That kind of preparation is holistic. It involves how you parent, how you budget, how you speak truth when it's unpopular, how you use your time, and how you protect what God has entrusted to you. In short, your ark is the shape your obedience takes. For some, that may mean downsizing, learning new skills, or starting that ministry God's been whispering about for years. For others, it might be preparing emotionally, building resilience, shedding bitterness, cultivating community before isolation becomes the default. If a storm hit tomorrow, not just globally but in your personal world, what have you already built to hold? Spiritually, this also means embracing truth even when it costs you. The ark was a ridiculous sight for decades. Rain didn't come for years. But Noah stayed consistent. That level of faith is rare. It's not loud, it's steady. And that kind of steadiness is a weapon in a culture built on volatility. There's also a very real call here to prepare practically. No, we're not stockpiling for the apocalypse. But Scripture doesn't separate spiritual insight from wise action. Joseph stored grain before famine. Proverbs speaks of the wise storing up oil. The early church shared resources before persecution hit. We can do the same. It's not fear. It's foresight. It's wisdom anchored in trust, not in panic. It might look like eliminating unnecessary debt. It might look like strengthening your local church community. It might look like mentoring others in truth and helping them see what's coming spiritually, not just politically. Because sometimes the people mocking your obedience now may be the same ones looking for shelter later. And here's the truth no one likes to say out loud. We're already in the rain. It just hasn't reached everyone yet. The cultural floodwaters are rising slowly, eroding values, clarity, conviction. The world isn't ending tomorrow, but something is being reshaped. And whether we float or sink won't be decided then. It's being decided now. So the question is not, what do I fear? The question is, what am I building in faith? Because like Noah, we're not just surviving, we're preserving something. Truth, legacy, hope. And maybe the most important thing we'll ever carry through this storm is not just ourselves, but the very clarity this generation needs on the other side of it. The ark, the storm, and what comes after. The point of Noah's story was never just the flood. It was what came next. Restoration, renewal, realignment. And the call for us now isn't just to prepare, it's to become the kind of people God can trust on the other side. By the time the rain stopped, the world was unrecognizable. The flood didn't just destroy, it redefined. The old world with its violence, noise, and corruption had been washed away. What Noah stepped into when the door opened wasn't a continuation. It was a beginning, a restart. A world soaked in silence, heavy with rebirth, marked not by chaos, but by covenant. And that's the part we often forget. We tell Noah's story as a survival epic, but its climax isn't the ark staying afloat. It's the moment the door opens again. That's where everything shifts. The ark, once a refuge, becomes a launch pad. And Noah isn't just a survivor. He's now a steward, a carrier of the future, a partner in recreation. The flood was never the point. The after was. And that raises the question we often avoid in crisis. What kind of person do you need to be when the storm passes? It's easy to prepare when fear drives us. To store, protect, hunker down. But what happens after? When the crisis clears and the door opens, who will you be on the other side? Noah stepped onto dry ground with more than animals and family. He carried responsibility, vision, and gratitude. One of his first acts was to build an altar, not a monument to himself, but an offering to God. He remembered who had guided him through the dark. That's the heart of transformation, not just making it through, but being changed by what you walked through. This is the invitation Noah's story extends to us now. Yes, build. Yes, prepare. But prepare not just for preservation, prepare for purpose. The next global crisis, whatever shape it takes, will not just expose systems, it will expose people, character, conviction, the hidden fractures in our faith. And it will clarify the ones who weren't just building to survive, but building to serve what comes next. There's a difference between surviving a flood and being sent to rebuild afterward. That's what the rainbow symbolizes. It wasn't just a promise of peace, it was a commission. It was God saying, "This isn't just about starting over, it's about trusting you with what comes next." And that trust is earned in the quiet work, in the decades of building when no one else sees, in the refusal to waver when culture calls you foolish, in the sacred monotony of preparing when the skies are still clear. Are you building a life God could trust with the after? Could your household, your faith, your community carry something into a new world? Could you model steadiness in the aftermath? Or are you simply hoping to make it through? Because Noah didn't just endure judgment, he carried legacy. And when the world needed restoration, he had the clarity to know what mattered. That's what made him righteous, not perfection, but alignment with God's purpose before, during, and after the storm. That's our call too, to be faithful in the prelude, obedient in the chaos, and transformational in the calm that follows. Noah's Ark wasn't a fantasy. It was a prototype for readiness, trust, and obedience. Not panic, not sensationalism, but steady, spirit-led preparation that can outlast anything the world throws. And maybe that's what we need to hear most. The storms will come, but the story doesn't end there. The ones who endure are not just the ones who survive. They're the ones who've been formed in the waiting, shaped in the silence, and refined by obedience. Noah didn't build to escape the flood. He built because he believed in the world that would come after. So build your ark, and when the skies darken, let your life be a vessel, not just for safety, but for promise.